This is the Get a Life podcast. Ex-Cult Conversations.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Get a Life podcast, Ex-Cult Conversations. We are here today with Carmen, and Ben is joining in as a guest today. So welcome, Ben. Okay. We have a lot of things that we're going to try and cover with OneSchool Global and some stuff from the PBCC Frank News. But first of all, we just going to touch briefly on Ben had a death threat that happened to him. And so I'll let Ben just kind of give an update on that and where that all went after it happened. So yeah, go ahead, Ben.
Well, thank you. I'm alive, safe and well. And yes, seriously though, I had a death threat, as most of you are probably aware, and I have it recorded. So I went to the police, and the police have taken it very seriously, and I've explained my situation, and I have even shown them screenshots of previous abusive messages that I've received in helping people leave. Obviously, people get heated and send me messages. So I've got those to sort of give it credit or clout. And so they have taken it very seriously, and it's a work in progress. Once we find out who it is, it's a bit of a process, because that was obviously a no caller ID. So what the police do, and if you're listening and in the brethren, you are not protected because you call on no caller ID. Everything's traceable. That's the beauty of technology. So they basically reach out to my service provider, who reaches out to the service provider that contacted them with that number and time, and then they get the number and then the person, and then we take it from there. But that's an update.
Perfect. Thanks.
And I will update with who it was, because obviously I will be getting that person charged, and yeah, I'll keep you updated.
Yeah. So I mean, as infallible as they feel in there, right? We take these things seriously.
100%. And it's important that we do take these things seriously. And anybody that is listening that has been threatened or anything at all, you must take these things seriously, because it is just one, it might not be the general consensus, or that I don't believe there was a hit out on me, but I do believe that it's one fanatic, it's one extremist. And we've had that scenario over and over with the mass shootings. It's not Christianity as a whole. It's one extreme Christian that's gone and shot up a nightclub in Orlando or whatever it was. That there are people that will take it that extreme, and you have to take these things seriously.
And I think that's the thing that Bruce doesn't realize, is that we've heard from the insides over the last couple of weekends and the last little bit of how extreme he's getting with his fervent prayers of our silencing and removals, that he needs to watch himself. He's got to watch himself, because all it takes is one teenager who's been drinking, or who's fed up, or who's frustrated, and goes out and does his job, right? And Bruce will be held responsible for it all. We'll make sure of that.
100%. And you cannot, and this is what I've explained to my uncle when I helped a young girl escape, and I had a very abusive message and very abusive interactions physically with the father and the mother, showing up to all of our workplaces and going nuts, basically. And I had this conversation with my uncle saying, he needs to take accountability and blah, blah, blah. And they came back with this email, and I should actually share this at some stage, but saying that we don't condone this. We do not. He acted on his own accord. He is not representative of the brethren. But the issue is here. You can't take and control somebody's whole life like you do, and not take accountability or responsibility for the bad things. You can't just be sharing photos of them as good Christian, peculiar people zealous for good works, out doing the rapid relief team work, RRT, these good people representing the Plymouth Brethren, and only take responsibility for that, because you control their whole life. So you have to take accountability and responsibility when they act out on, they're acting out because they think their daughter is being snatched by the devil. That's your faith that instilled that belief in them, and therefore they're acting on that.
And especially when he is so loud right now with asking for the removal of us and the removal of the posers and the silence of opposers. Like when you put those words into 50,000 different minds, those 50,000 different minds are going to interpret that. And you take one Bruce Hale's lover who just wants to go out there and do the job for him, right? Like it's just, that's what he just needs to realize, how careful he needs to be with what he's implementing in his services. Yeah.
And he's really got nothing to lose. Like, to him, he's got nothing to lose. Like, he's got a myriad of men that literally, for want of a better expression, literally ass crawl to try and get the next position closest to him. So they will, and I remember my priest saying to me, I would die for our brother. So it's that mentality that is instilled in you from youth.
Exactly.
You will be a Christian crusader.
Yeah.
Well, and it's important to, if you call yourself a mainstream Christian church, praying for the removal or the silencing of people is completely contrary to Christianity. Yeah. Christianity says you pray for your enemies. You pray for their restoration or their changing of their minds, not the removal or the silencing. That is completely contrary to any mainstream Christian church there is.
And I think it's such an important thing to touch on, particularly if you're inside the brethren listening to this. Okay, it's me speaking. You can have your opinion and call me an apostate. I will happily take that label. I'm comfortable with that. But you got to look at the facts. You are, and you have been advised, and I experienced that myself growing up, having special prayer meetings to pray for the removal of apostates or opposers. But that very action you're teaching your children is highly toxic and highly problematic for a child to grow up thinking that's okay. If somebody isn't aligning with my beliefs, I can pray for their removal. This is how you get a society that is so toxic, homophobic, racist, misogynistic, and very, that don't accept any other religion but their own, because you're instilling these beliefs from a child to pray for the removal of, which is essentially the death of, the murder of. Yeah. So you've got to think, if you've got kids and you're in there, what are you raising your children in a society like that for? I think it's an important thing to think about.
And I think this is what this whole podcast is kind of geared towards today, is more towards having the parents look at what their children are in, right? What do you want your children around? We've got some explicit stuff that we want to share with you. So this is definitely, viewer discretion is required with what we're going to show and talk about. But it's just for all those people in there that are listening to this, it's just sit back with an open mind and be like, is this what I want my child around? Is this what I want my children hearing? Is this what I want my children? Are these the guests that I want my children to be having at school? That's what we want you to all have. So Ben has had, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say on that too, like, take us, we're just messengers. We're just delivering what we're presented with and what we've seen. Yes, we have our own opinions on that, but you can form your own from this. And what we're presenting today is some messages that we've received from outsiders, not from us that have left, not from ex-members, from outsiders that have witnessed this. And these are your children they're talking about. These are the environments in which you're putting your children in and keeping them in.
Yeah, so we're going to start off. So Ben started a TikTok account, a couple months ago?
Yes.
Yeah, and it's doing very well. It's exploding with everybody reaching out to him. So we're going to start off, and we're going to just share some messages that Ben's received to start with.
And these messages, obviously, I've kept the usernames and the people at their discretion just to protect them, because obviously they've all witnessed the death threat thing and are a bit nervous. And excuse me, I do have a lot of other people that have reached out, which I haven't shared yet, but this is just a couple.
I just got to figure out how to make this a full screen. Oh, here we go.
We can see it full screen.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. Do you want me to read it?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, you explain this one.
So I'll put my glasses on, my good set of eyes. So somebody reached out to me and basically said she's happy for me to share this. She witnessed this and other teachers have witnessed this. This is here in Australia. And it kind of hit close to home to me because obviously I'm she told me other details. So I know who this was. And I knew this family. So basically she says, hey, I'm a kindy teacher. And when I was at uni placement, there were several brethren attending the school, children. Apparently a big deal due to the rules, but they had things in place like they could only have their meals at their own table, etc. Which, you know, if you went to a public school, you were like, I was taken home for lunch. This was normal. Anyway, I witnessed highly sexualized play from these children that was well above their level of knowledge could be, which made it obvious that they witnessed or experienced sexual encounters. I brought it up with the mentor teacher and she said they were well aware and reporting it constantly to child protection, but nothing was happening as a result. And she's asked, is this something that is common? Is there a lot of hidden sexual assault of children? Or is this a once-off thing? And then she goes on to the next slide to explain that the kids were basically only play together, excluded from other play, just played a really messed up family. And knowing what I know about child development and play, this wasn't good. The poor teachers that had to watch, and knowing that there was nothing that was happening. I was there for 2 weeks and it affected me, yet let alone being there for a year or two. The parents would basically say when they reported it to the parents, which I'll explain more about that. They would say, oh, it's just kids being kids. We'll talk to them. But I don't know if you can see, but it says from the picture, but down below, it says they were literally role-playing oral sex on dolls, which is not kids being kids at all. So I knew this family and they were moved and kept together whilst it's obvious from this that one of the parents or someone they were close to were being sexually abused. And just because I know more about the story, I know it was one of the parents. And the brethren kept them together. And this is the issue, I think, and that this is why we're bringing it up, is that there is no reporting it's not taken seriously. They aren't, from what we've seen, they aren't you can report something to Child Protection Services or something like those organizations here in Australia in particular. Yet, from what I've heard, they can't do any more than alert the parent. And it's really hard and it's a really difficult thing to navigate because more often than not, is one of the parents. And in this case, it was. So they just up and move them to another school, and which is what they did. You know, they were brought up here to New South Wales, to somewhere very close to me. And again, you witnessed a very dysfunctional family being held together because the brethren don't allow divorce. They don't allow this, what would be not considered normal in the real world, to either report this and have that parent dealt with like properly. And at the end of the day, it's the children that suffer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, let's go on to the next one here. You've got another.
Okay, this was another person that reached out saying, hi, Ben, I have a little insight into the cult. I'm a teacher, and then she goes on to say, I'm only just discovered your TikTok and making my way through your videos. You made one about where you discussed children being sent to live with other families. We used to have posters up in classrooms at the school that outlined behavioral management. The ultimate punishment for a non-compliant student. This is in the brethren schools. This is the schools that you brethren send your kids to. The ultimate punishment for a non-compliant student was for them to be sent to another campus. I remember being horrified that the other teachers, all non-brethren, of course, weren't disturbed by it. I also watched the video where you responded to someone who has worked for a brethren and suggested that I didn't know what was going on because I had left 7 years ago and things have changed. The absolute worst thing about working at a brethren school, where the people who work there have no insight into what is going on. And I explained in that video, basically, of course, you're not going to see the worst of the brethren. They put on their best face or best front at work because they are literally held accountable by outsiders because they're working with them. From my perspective, the community members are brainwashed and really don't know any better. After a few years, I came to believe that this is such an interesting point to know. After a few years, and this woman's opinion, she said, after a few years, I came to believe that the only people who can successfully work in that environment are those that hold similar beliefs, i.e. a racist, sexist, or homophobic. So next slide. So that was a really interesting point. And to have that, like, from an ex-teacher of a OneSchool, to say that, because she was explaining that, she was like, how do people stay in these schools? How do people stay in these environments where, particularly schools, because I guess the workplace, you're not really coming across people, you're not dealing with children that are, growing up and exploring or finding out about themselves. You're dealing with adults that have been brainwashed for years, basically. So working in a school environment would be a lot different, because you're basically teaching children, learning, who are curious. And it was a really interesting point that she said that the only people who can successfully work in those environments are people that hold similar beliefs, that are racist, sexist, or homophobic. I just thought, actually, that's true, that I 100% believe that, because I think about the teachers that I grew up, like when I went to OneSchool, or MET, they called it back then, the teachers that have stayed there would be of similar beliefs. It's just a really interesting, and I've had conversations with teachers that have left that I'm friends with now, and they share, it's just the same thing said a different way. It's a very interesting point.
I think we had an interesting conversation along that same line with a principal, and she said she was the 6th principal in 5 years. And you ask her, like, what would cause that much turnover in even a higher paid position like a principal? And she said, well, you have to realize that this teaching environment is so harsh, because you either have to conform to the brethren rules and ideology, or you don't succeed. It's just as simple as that.
Yeah.
So there's somebody quite high up in OneSchool that was a teacher at my school, and an interesting observation that some teachers that have said to me their opinion is that this teacher that is now high up in OneSchool is literally being brainwashed by the brethren. She's literally like a clone brethren, but just not brethren. It was just really interesting observation to make. I'm like, yes, they would have got her at a vulnerable stage in her life and made it better by money or a position of power. They've got it.
Yeah. Her next statement here is very familiar. A lot of people who either work for the brethren or the principals and teachers all say this next part that she says here. She talks about, all power to you. I feel scarred just from working there and wish I didn't know anything about them. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think she goes on to the next slide. I think there's more to it as well.
Yeah, this is the next one.
Yeah. So she said it must have been, she said, I remember when I first started working there, the Year 9 students, so these are kids that are 14, 15 years old, created videos for their health class that were played in an assembly. The videos were to educate about the dangers of drink driving. Nobody but me seemed even slightly concerned that the kids were not only drinking beers, but also actually driving the car. These are children, underage drinking and underage driving. There was not even an adult supervising, so no way at all was it legal. The health teacher also received a phone call from the Victorian police here in Australia because one of the kids had contacted them asking to borrow the police car. The audacity. They don't wear seatbelts, and more than once I had to report a student on his L plate driving a school bus full of kids while the mum that should have been driving, next slide, I think she was sitting in the back, was the mum that should have been driving was sitting in the back with it while another student sat in the passenger seat with a baby on their lap, which really makes me think about the incident that we've all just heard about where the young guy killed from reckless drink driving, killed other family members, which is, every year I feel like we hear about something like that, the dangers, the toxic drinking culture within the brethren. And then she goes on to here to talk about something really interesting. Some of the kids were so anxious at school, it was heartbreaking. I often find myself wondering if the whole religion isn't just some elaborate tax evasion scheme. She's not the first to have that opinion. Am I right thinking that all businesses are actually centrally owned? Well, that's another interesting observation. I can't remember what it's called, but they have a big training facility in Sydney. I think she'd be referring to UBT. The schools do in-house professional development in the same place, full of middle-aged men and unmarried girls bringing them tea. Very disturbing. Well, let's just hope it's tea. I've heard they do have a Scotch trolley every now and then, but that may be hearsay. I used to get so frustrated with the teachers who would work there and happily turn a blind eye. They shouldn't be allowed to run their own school. They don't maintain proper duty of care. At one point, there was a bit of a romance happening between two Year 12 students. I approached the school leaders as it was clear the girl particularly and the sisters and the cousins of the students involved were all being ostracized and bullied by the whole school. Nothing was done by the school teachers. The girl was eventually taken into a meeting with a CA, a brethren man. There was no situation. This is so important to know, because this sort of stuff used to happen to me with the brethren CAs or the brethren principals. There is no situation in a normal school where a female student would have a meeting with a male alone. She came out very distressed. They threatened to send her to live interstate with another family. And this is really like their go-to with, children misbehaving. I remember an incident where I was, a naughty kid, and multiple times where I was taken to that office with the brethren CA or principal, they used to call it back then. And he would sit on the opposite side of the desk and literally bully you into tears and threaten you with all sorts of ways that you shouldn't be threatened with. Like it's not religion. Like, so you can't do that. And that's up to the parents. Like, it's a school. And I know it might be a religious school, but to sit there and threaten, all sorts of like eternal damnation and the rapture, you want to be here for the rapture, like to a kid in Year 7, was really traumatizing. And then she goes on to say there are so many dodgy situations, teachers being sacked for mandatory reporting students with unexplained injuries, mothers who everyone knew were being abused, but nobody did anything to help. I know a student reported to a teacher, not me, that they were questioning their sexuality and shared information that gave the teacher reason for them to be concerned for their well-being. Despite it being a legal requirement, that teacher couldn't do anything for a fear of revealing this to the brethren would put the kid in more danger. So that's another really important point. Like, I remember growing up in the brethren school, and obviously I knew I was gay. I knew that at 9, but questioning your sexuality and having nobody to talk to about it, and even hinting at it to a teacher, nothing was done further because they're too afraid, that the fear that the brethren have over these teachers, because they'll lose their jobs. And also it doesn't look good if they wouldn't like, you can't, like, losing a job in a professional industry is hard enough, let alone something like a school. Like that, it can carry a bit of an ambiguity as to why you lost your job. And would be a very hard one to explain. Like, why would you have worked there in the first place, I guess? So yeah, there's some very real concerns from it. And the point I want to make here is these are just 2 examples I've shared out of the myriad of messages. To give you some idea of numbers, one of the videos I posted has had like 1.1 million views. I haven't even gotten back to all of the messages, questions around all of this. Like, there have been so many people reach out, not just from Australia, because this is obviously a worldwide reach, like from UK, from everywhere. And it's really disturbing because the general common denominator here is the same. These schools are extremely homophobic, they're extremely racist, they're extremely misogynistic, and so are the teachings, and so are the people they kind of, prefer to employ. It seems to be the general opinion of OneSchool Global.
And it seems that, like, from our conversations that we've had with principals and teachers, it seems to be that the boys get away with a lot, and the kids get away with a lot in a sense, right? Because the children have their parents to protect them, and especially if your parents are high up on the hierarchy system, you pretty much can get away with anything. And those teachers and principal can't do anything about it. That's what we were told. Like that's one of our last conversations that we had with the principal. That was what it was. And she also told us that, that they're not allowed to give out grades less than 50%. She said like they could go in there and put a little dot on a piece of paper and you have to give them 50% for that.
Well, I'm a little bit annoyed that that wasn't in place when I was in school.
Right?
I would have appreciated that, particularly in maths.
Yeah. I'm just going through some of the notes that we just took from
that again is brethren manipulating the curriculum. I remember having a conversation with a teacher about in science, like it was a very like hard topic, you know, were we allowed to study in year 11, 12, were we not? And I remember like parts of the curriculum where it talks about evolution, Charles Darwin theory, we literally were told the name and that is it. Like it was never, and I remember the fear of the teacher trying to teach it to us. And I knew about this topic and I knew how taboo it was. So I was inquisitive for that reason. And it just really, highlighted how much the brethren edit or manipulate the curriculum to serve their thought, like their teaching, their way of life.
And we'll come back to this in a little bit because we're going to talk about Massimo today. And actually, one of the things that he accredited the PBCC to doing is he accredited them that they even taught the Darwin theory, right? He actually says that they do that. So I could just imagine how little of it that they teach, right?
Yes, yeah.
One of the teachers that I remember, that one teacher that we spoke to, we asked her and she was an ex-staff member at that point. We asked her, what was the most demoralizing thing that you found about working at one of these schools? And she said the number one gripe that she had is teaching young girls and young boys. The young girls were undoubtedly the smartest young ladies she had ever taught. And they would come into the classroom with these goals of, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a nurse, I want to be a teacher.
Veterinarian, yeah.
Watch them and follow them for a couple of years. And as they grew up inside the church, they realized they would never be a doctor. They would never be a nurse. And then watching them accept this and just quit striving to do so good because they were never going to go anywhere. Their only hope in life was to either be a secretary for their husband or to be a stay-at-home mom or a brethren.
Some sort of a position inside the brethren, yeah.
Yeah, like they never are allowed to go to university, so they'll never be doctors, nurses.
And she said it was Harvard quality brightness. Like she said, Harvard quality that some of these girls had.
Yeah.
Definitely. I can vouch for that. The girls in my class were particularly bright. The girls in my class were the smartest, like amongst the smartest women I've met. Like, and it really, I can relate to that too, that whole mentality of what's this for? I used to have those thoughts myself when I didn't do well at math and didn't try or certain topics, because I was like, well, for what to what? I've got a job lined up. I don't need a career. I don't need this. And essentially you do lose that hope. You do lose that sense to strive. And I guess that's the whole point of learning and teaching and schooling, is to want something, like to be able to get into college or university. And for, I think they did offer at one point an ATAR where it's a thing here in Australia where you can get, accreditation to be able to pursue to uni, but it was very much discouraged. It was like, we're never using this. You're not allowed to use this, so why would you do it? And I think Cassie Davies touched on that in her podcast about, and she would be somebody that I 100% believe would be a scholar. Like she's very intelligent and all, the same thing where I think they were, not allowed to get grades or pursue that in the university level.
Yeah,
and then her flip side of that was the boys would come in and they had absolutely no drive. They didn't care. The only thing they were there to do was to fulfill their number of hours to be there, because their goal in life was to just go out and be in their daddy's business and make money. They had no desire for knowledge. They were already had a pre-planned course, and the number one goal in life was to make money.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that is your thought process. I can say that from my own personal experience. You did not strive. The only thing that I ever enjoyed was arts or craft or, something creative, which, was a taboo anyway as you got older, in the older years, because we wanted to study art in year 12 and we were told we couldn't because you don't know the medium or the material in which you'll get in your paper, and it could be a nude. So, I mean, for heaven's sake, worries when I look back now.
Yeah, this principal talked about how she said the girls had been brainwashed to thinking that they were less than, right? And that is really the misogynistic culture that they have, right? Is the women are placed below.
And it is, and every single person that has reached out has said the same thing. The general consensus is that opinion of people is that women are servile in that they are there to serve, they are less than. And it's slowly, if you think about it too, it's seamlessly indoctrinated into that world, into our lives when we were back there, because even just down to meeting rooms, the very small, sort of barely noticeable fact that mics aren't in where the rows where the women sit. It's, that power. It's like you don't get to speak, and we're showing you. Like it's those small unnoticeable things that take away. By the time you realize it, well, you already have accepted it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we another thing that we've had brought through multiple teachers and this principle was we talk often about the disappearing of teachers and the disappearing of people that just all of a sudden are just gone. They're, one day they're there and the next day they're gone. And so we had asked her, like, on average, what would it be? And she had said on average 5 per month that would disappear, which is crazy.
Students or teachers?
Teachers. Yeah.
So, but they would be let go if so kids would often complain, right, to their parents, and then those parents would come back. This is the problem we get to when we have such a tight-knit society inside a school, is because a lot of these CAs have kids in that school. A lot of these people, right, they're all intertwined. So it's not like going to a public school and everything's kept separate. In here, everything's together. And so she said, like you did not complain about a CA's child. You just didn't. No matter what that child did, that child got away with it. Right. And if you did, she called it, you were disappeared overnight. Right. But another good point that she had mentioned was the accreditation that people don't have to do. I mean, this principal didn't have any. She did not have an admin degree. She didn't have the requirements to be a principal. I mean, she said she was good at it, and I totally believe she was. But I mean, there was somebody else that she had mentioned that had worked there, didn't even have a college degree, had been there for 5 years teaching.
Special ed teacher. Yeah. Special ed teachers. You think that would be a special ed? You'd have to get special education, special credit, special teaching to deal with those kinds of kids, because they have learning disabilities, they have behavior disabilities, they have developmental disabilities. I mean, that usually requires at least a college degree. And this person didn't even have a college degree.
And the reason they think that this is okay is because they teach globally, right? So they have this belief that, if you're not accredited in that state or in that province or wherever they are, it doesn't matter because you're teaching globally. But I mean, teachers should at least have their degree, right? Like I mean, again, I ask you, is this really the school you want your child in?
And I think that too would be hard, because like teachers, like I've had other people message me and say they found out, they Googled, they found out what school they were, or they've watched a TikTok. And one lady recently, she said, "Thank you, you saved me from a horrendous job." Like I was teaching at one of these schools. And when I was in year 7, I think we counted like 13 or 14 teachers we went through that year. Like our school in particular, the older kids were like, they were a bad school. Like it was some of the stories that those teachers could come forward with are just next level. And that's the thing, that the problem is you're creating a society where it's enabled. It's not frowned upon. It's not stopped, because you see those same kids at church. It's the same groups.
Yeah.
It's the same bullies. It's the same toxic behavior that continues.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I agree.
And you're creating a whole generation of kids that have no discipline. They've never been made
No
to mind.
accountability.
If your teacher is a woman and you're a boy, you don't have to listen to her because she's a woman. If your teacher complains about you, well, we as parents will go in and get rid of her. We'll just disappear her. There's no accountability. What does that teach a child?
Yeah. And I mean, their excuse that they would say to the other teachers when they would ask is that their excuse always was, well, they moved on, which any teacher knows you don't move on to another job halfway through the year, right? Or a third way of the year or a quarter way of the year. You don't. A teacher signs up for the whole year. You can't have that many teachers disappearing and being told, oh, they've moved on. You know that's not true. Not true. Another thing that she talked about in the school was, we're going to go into, is the alcohol, right? So alcohol in water bottles. Like
7th and 8th grade students.
7th and 8th grade, alcohol in water bottles.
And that has been like every second message has been not just from people that have teachers, but like you saw the one that we shared today, where she was concerned about the level of how young they were drinking alcohol. But you've got to realize that alcohol was part of our growing up from the very onset, from the very moment you can sit upright in the Lord's Supper meeting. They are dipping your dummy or shoving the supper cup full of alcohol into your mouth. It's seamlessly integrated into your life. You think it's a normal part of life. And then on top of that, you've got a very misogynistic, in my opinion, approach to it, where a man goes, it makes a strong man stronger and a weak man weaker. So of course, it's like the story of the emperor's new clothes. You don't want to be seen not being the strong man. So you assume that you are, and therefore that gives you the necessary approval to drink that much or to abuse alcohol. And it's not just men. Like, I know there are women in that separate, but then it leads to things like there was a gentleman that lived down the road from me that committed suicide because he battled with alcohol, and they don't seek professional help. They don't, and as much as they say they do, not professional help from brethren members. We're talking proper help and proper facilities, not just a old-fashioned doctor that you've been friends with forever that has techniques that they used in the early 16th century to cure somebody from alcohol, because it's more than that. It's the high-pressure society that you're creating that leads people to drink. Mm-hmm. They need this device to cope.
Yeah.
Hey, well, we had that other teacher that said about the alcohol in the water bottles. She said it was so strong that when the regional director came around, she took him down there. She said, I've got this problem. I do not know what to do to deal with it. If I go to a CA, they'll disappear me. But I want somebody to back me up. So they went down to the area where the backpacks are kept. And the kids were outside, and they proceeded to open a couple of water bottles and smell it. And lo and behold, one of the students walked by, and the next thing they heard, they were being accused by the students. This is a high up teacher and a regional director. They were being accused of licking and drinking out of the water bottles. So no accountability at all, like no respect for the position of a regional director or a teacher. Just, what are you doing drinking out of my water bottle? Like, back in my days, I mean, I would have assumed we would have got suspended immediately for even thinking of bringing alcohol in the school, let alone, putting it in your water bottle and bringing it to school.
Yeah, but for them to do that would be for them to acknowledge that there is a problem, and then they'd have to acknowledge from where that problem stems, and that would be themselves. So of course they're not going to
too much accountability for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I asked an insider here the other day. I said, if there was one thing you would want seen changed in there, what would it be? And this insider says, separation bullshit gone and the corruption. And then the next answer was, they need a dry out center for a lot of these drunks as well. Yeah, which it is. The alcohol is such a horrible problem in there. It's such a problem in there.
And the sad thing is they use scripture to back it up, and therefore it's okay. Like it's every second scripture is a that backs up their claims to drinking alcohol, or the leader does it.
And I think the biggest thing that the issue that they have in these schools, and what everybody's come across on all of in our inboxes, is that they have no power to come in and say what needs to be changed. And even when that does happen, so this principal, the big guys came down to this specific school and asked these teachers what they wanted, right? And so she got the courage up to say, yeah, like there's too much change, there's no warning, there's no notice, there's always something changing. And they came back and said that it makes you a better educator. Right? Like it's so the thing is there's just I agree. So they do have these bullying, and we had asked her too about the bullying program that was just newly implemented, right? And it really was just a checklist. It was like, okay, here, we watched this video, now let's make a checklist of it. It was not implemented the way that a school should have an anti-bullying program implemented, right? And I figured that that's probably what would have happened when I heard that this anti-bullying program was being implemented, that it probably was just some simple thing that they could show that, hey, yes, we're doing this. And which is, it's sad. It's so sad for those people that are so horribly bullied, right? She said that there was kids that were making sexual comments to the teachers, kids that were bullying and saying, my dad's the boss of your dad, right? Like it's so systemic, and it comes from so many avenues that for them just to pull out a video and be like, I'm going to play this video for, and to say that I've implemented an anti-bullying program, it's not going to be enough. It's just not going to be enough.
No, exactly. It's a band-aid where the issue is the wound, right? The toxic behavior they enable.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's the same with like moving kids around. Like I remember at school, my cousin was shifted to that school, taken off his family. I know of another girl that was shifted to the school because of the alleged, abuses of her sisters. And there was so many different changes with kids, and then with teachers, it didn't provide a stable environment for learning, which is what ultimately, or their reasoning for having these schools, or protection. Like, where was the protection when I was sexually assaulted at that school? There is no protection there at all. I was bullied horrifically to the point of I wanted to commit suicide. There is no protection. These schools do not offer protection. They harbor and enable bullies, and that just continues from generation to generation. This is not a school you'd want to send your kids to. And they try and give you examples of public schools and how terrible it was. No, I know people that go to public schools and have been, and their kids go to public schools. They never have this issue. And if they do, it's reported correctly, not to a community member who deals with it how they see fit, with people that have actual specific trainings or accolades to deal with this.
Yeah. And one of the things that she really pointed out was that even the CAs, so when you even go to report something of this, there's one of two scenarios where it's a CA that has a lot of power and knows that he doesn't have to do anything about it, or it's a CA that has no power and has no clout, right? So she says it's very set up in a way that when you need to report anything about abuse, there's really, it either doesn't go anywhere because this person knows that he doesn't need to set it anywhere, or this person doesn't have enough power to do anything. It's somebody who's as meek and mild and at the bottom of the totem pole, and he knows that if he goes to somebody with this problem, nothing's going to be done about it.
This is so representative of the wider community, though. Like, if you go and report a sexual abuse or assault to my grandma or something, or a family that's lower in their society, yes, that person might be genuinely concerned about what happened. But if somebody higher up, so an example, one of the Hales family allegedly groped a man who, I have heard this story, so it's an opinion or alleged story, assaulted this man, by grabbing him in the balls, and someone very close to Bruce, and that person reported it. And because it was, of the Hales family, they were just told, it's been dealt with, you need to forgive. Like, that person genuinely had a concern. Like, it really affects your overall placing of what you thought this wholesome Christian group is. Like, you have these people on pedestals, right? In particular, Bruce Hales or the Hales family. And so when at all any of that psyche is interrupted, it can really affect you mentally. For example, when you're abused. So when this person was assaulted, as a result, that person has battled with alcohol to date because it's uninterrupted that balance. And this is the problem. When you're not exposed to the wider community, when you're not even given awareness about abusers or the fact that there could be abusers, and it's all hidden for protection, you can really affect somebody's mental health when they are brutally exposed to it because they're so naive or so innocent. And that contrast is really what affects people mentally and scars them for life.
Mm-hmm. And I think another thing too is that, they shouldn't have alleged pedophiles going into these schools or being at school functions. And that's happening. That's happening where, they shouldn't, like, that should just not be a situation. If you're really going to take care of a situation, especially situations that haven't been dealt with, those kinds of things just shouldn't happen. Right? If you were truly a Christian community and there for the welfare of your next generation, those things, you don't cure a pedophile overnight. You don't cure a pedophile by sitting them in a room full of priests and being like, so you did this, 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 and this. And the person says, oh yes, I did that. And then it's all forgiven. And then those people that were affected by that pedophile now have to say that they forgive him too. And he gets off scot-free and turns around and another generation gets affected. That's why it's so systemic, is because they don't stop the problem. They don't heal the problem,
And that's then they don't talk about it. They need to speak about these things because they, like my family, when my sister was groomed, my parents don't understand that. They can't see it. They're like, no, the Lord knows. I'm like, of course he does, if that's what you want to believe, but it doesn't stop it. Yes. You need to stop these people from being in situations where they can groom children and therefore abuse them. And this is the problem. You're saying that it doesn't stop. It doesn't. No, that's right. It doesn't. It enables it. And if you know of somebody being abused, or you're an abuser by proxy because you're enabling it, like you aren't stopping it. And this is why we're bringing this to attention, particularly to people inside. You need to realize what you are raising your children in and what schools you're bringing them up in, and your family and friends. You can't trust everybody. And yes, you can say that you can't trust everybody out here, but we have a choice out here. We don't get a list with who we have to have for lunch on Sunday. We don't have restrictions about where we can't work. We don't have restrictions about where we can or can't send our kids to school. We make that choice.
Yeah. And I think this kind of leads us into the people that are associated. So we know the brethren stand by the whole scripture of withdrawing from iniquity, right? And then we have someone, and if anybody's following Facebook on the exclusive brethren pages there's been conversation about Massimo in there. Massimo Introvigne. I don't know how you say his last name, but I just call him Massimo Introvigne.
Give us some background. I don't know who he is. So explain who this is.
Massimo is a scholar of Satanism. So, and he's also does a lot
literally known as that?
Yes. So yes, he's known as that. He's known also as a cult apologist. So if you research him, there's tons of things. So I'm going to just share a screen here I'm going to start with the books that he's written. Let me just get it up here first.
So the reason that we're bringing his name up, or the reason that we're drawing attention to him, is because there's actual pictures of him being in the school, which should alarm every parent.
Yeah. So I'm gonna get to those pictures, but I want to lead up to it. So here is a list of books that he has written. So I'm not going to go through all of them. It's a lot of magical stuff, a lot of Satanism, pedophilia. He's done one on the Plymouth Brethren, sacred eroticism. The church, he's done one with. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say his latest book, I just Googled while you're doing it, is the Sacred Eroticism, Tantra and Sexuality in Movement for Spiritual Integration. Integration, sorry.
Into the absolute.
Into the absolute. So this person, Massimo, they've had at their school, what, giving speeches or?
I'm actually not sure what he's been doing at the school, but there's pictures with him inside the school and outside of the school. And if I was a parent with a child going to one of these OneSchool Global's schools, I would be taking my child out of there ASAP. No way would I allow my child to be around anybody who either teaches about this, practices this, writes books about this. I don't care what he's doing. No way would I have a child around this. And that is from my own personal experience. I'm not going to go into those personal experiences, but all I can say is that I haven't revealed everything that's happened to me in where Ellen took me to. And all I can say is that having pictures of Massimo in an OSG school, yeah, I reported it to the police. I gave all this information to the police to help him with my case. So all I can say is that I would not trust what he is doing in a school. I just wouldn't. And so you go through all of these. I'm not going to go through this. You guys can read. Sorry for the listeners. Just Google Massimo Introvigne and it'll show all his books. But there's The Return of Magic.
So he's written the Church of Scientology. He's written a book on the Plymouth Brethren. So yeah. Do they approve?
So, well, in the book, I have not read through the whole entire book, but in the book, he is pro Plymouth Brethren, right? He is trying to make them look good, right? But I mean, we're talking about witchcraft, evil, and the mimic of the devil. It's very. So
reading down this list of titles, the hypocrisy just kind of hit me. The teachers talk about the chapters that get ripped out of the school books at the school, the chapters that get ripped out because they won't allow them to be taught, or the things that cut out of the books. Every single book on this list would be banned from the Plymouth Brethren library, and yet this is what they're allowing to tell their story. That just seems like the hypocrisy is just...
And they're letting him in the school. Like, you guys, he was in the school. And not only that, not even only in the school was he. Here, this is from Massimo's website himself. Here is the picture. What? Here is this picture I took in the Pennsylvania home of a member of Brethren Forth. That's kind of what exclusive brethren were called. Shows her genealogy from Derby. And I mean, he actually doesn't even have it right on here. He's got John Stephen Hales serving from 1922 to 2002. He's got Harvey Symington spelt wrong, and it should be James Symington. But still, he was in some brethren's home and got to take a picture of this. Yet, could you imagine if we just showed up out of the blue to our parents' house after being called an apostate or writing the stuff that we're writing about or talking about what we're talking about? There's no way we'd be let in. But yet they let in this person who investigates and researches, and there's pictures of him with, like, in Transylvania with Dracula paraphernalia.
He's the president or something. I'm reading he's like the president of some Dracula group.
Yeah, like it's absolutely crazy. Absolutely crazy. So I guess my whole concern when it took me a bit to recover from seeing what I saw, because it jolted me in a way that I was like, here's this man inside a school where there's small children and, like, with no protection. I don't know. For me, if it was me in there I would be showing up at the school the next day and I'd be like, I refuse to have anything to do with you. You are not allowed to have my child until this is cleaned up. That's how I would put it. I'm going to share a little bit of a video. So this is one of his teachings that he does. And they actually talk about his book that he wrote in this. I just have to wait for this thing to go up here. my top thing won't go up. I can't get to my tab. There we go. Oh, this is another one of his. This is a whole thing that he did. But I'm just going to play this for you. Can you guys see this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So here he is. He's giving a lecture, or he's teaching somewhere. And I just want you guys to listen to this for a few minutes.
Greetings. My name is Kathy Gutierrez, and it is my great honor to introduce my colleague and friend, Massimo Introvigne, our second keynote speaker. Massimo's list of accomplishments is far too long to even begin to make a dent in here. So suffice to say that he has published more than 80 academic books, and I have not yet found a bad one. His most recent is on the Plymouth Brethren. That's the first monograph on this group. It's a small conservative evangelical group about which he's told me there's nothing in common with this conference except for the fact that Aleister Crowley's father was a member. And I'm pleased to be able to tell you that because in a rare moment of a bad decision, Oxford University Press decided to take that part out, so you'll only hear it here. So Massimo is currently the director of Chesner, the Center for the Study of New Religious Religions, and he's the founder of 1988. Yeah, 88. So that has been a colossal undertaking.
Sorry.
That picture you showed and the sacred, what was it called? I can't remember now.
Sacred, yeah.
Literally looked like a glorified spiritual version of an orgy.
100%. Like, that's what I'm saying, is this is just crazy. Like, how I just don't grasp the concept of how Bruce Hales can come to terms with like allowing a man like this. And so I've got more pictures. Obviously, I'm going to take this a little bit further. So I want to go back to Aleister Crowley quick. So Aleister Crowley is someone who's very much in the occult sector of religion, right? So he's known to be a part of that kind of a group. And it was Aleister Crowley's father who was a member of the PBCC or Exclusive Brethren or whatever they were back then. So I'm going to share you some. I'm going to show you some pictures here as we go through this. Can you see that?
In a Brethren school.
Yeah. So here's Massimo in a OneSchool Global classroom. Here he is outside the OneSchool campus in Sweden.
Wait, where's he from? So did he do some sort of tour of all the Brethren schools?
I'm not sure. These are all from his, it was from his website. And we've just added little labels on there of saying what it is. And then this is him again with the principal of the OneSchool Global New York campus. Here he is lecturing an audience of Satanists about Satanism. So I
wonder, was he teaching that at the Brethren schools?
I have no idea. You can only imagine I have no idea. I don't know what went on with him inside those schools, but what I want to relate and have the parents from OneSchool Global understand is I want you to understand who this man is, what he represents, what he teaches, what he stands for, what he is involved in, and he was inside your school. And if I was comfortable enough telling what went on with me in a place that Ellen took me to, you would pick your children up and you would leave the PBCC tomorrow. I guarantee it. So here we are. Oh, hang on, I don't need that. So I just want to blow this up a little bit. And yes, this is a little bit of vulgar, but I just want to show you. Here's a clip from something that he was teaching on.
We need produce high, but is that children?
It looks like it, doesn't
they
it?
look like children. Oh my God. I mean, they look like children to me.
Yeah. And they just, I mean, he should not be in the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church schools or anywhere around there. I don't care if he wrote a book about them or they think that he is there and he helps, clean up their image a bit. What this man teaches should be nowhere near what they believe. It's complete and utter hypocrisy. You talk about being, you talk about being an apostate and being an opposer. You literally are opposing your own faith.
But and I guess the whole point here is the hypocrisy of all of this.
Yeah, exactly. So again, here he is teaching about Crowley. So this will be Aleister Crowley.
Sex magic techniques. Wow. I mean, I'm not going to yuck someone's yums, but teaching, I'd be interested to know what he was teaching in a children's school, in a brethren school.
Why was he in there? Why was he in the school?
Yeah.
I mean, I guarantee you, Ben and Carmen, if we were to show up at a OSG school tomorrow, do you think they would let us in?
Not at all.
No,
well,
they would not let us in.
Would they let me come to schools and do teaching on, being okay with your sexuality and actually giving a proper, having a proper conversation that they should be having with kids or with the teenagers at schools, saying that, rather than our sex education at school was literally not a sex education. We didn't not know anything about protection or anything, which is, from what I've heard, you are taught in normal schools.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's just, it is the complete and utter hypocrisy. But for me, my alarm bells were just ringing right off of I am just, you be careful. That's my message from my personal experiences and what I've been through is be careful. Be careful with your children. You need to make sure where your children are and what your children are being introduced to. It is far more evil than what you find out here. Having somebody like that at a school, you will not find that out here in public schools or in Catholic schools. No. That is, you just won't. Not. What you guys are introducing your children to in there is utter evilness. It's just absolutely so.
I'd be asking questions. Don't take it from our word, but ask questions. Literally ask questions. Why is he here?
Go Google him. Go to a public library. Read up his whole Wikipedia. Go to his website. We could do a whole podcast just on him and what he's done and who he is really. So we're just giving you a little tip of the iceberg. But what I would suggest to you is go to a library and go and do your own research. Go research him. Watch his videos of what he teaches to other people.
And it's not to defame him by any means.
No, not at all.
Showing people this is what this man is, and this is what you're allowing in your school. But most often when they write a book on your religion, it's financed or partially financed, or information is either given or not given about your religion. If you participated in that book in any way, knowing what other books he's written, I mean, it's just got question marks written all over it.
I mean, he's written a book about the Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, Scientology, right? So he is known as a cult apologist. And I don't have an issue. I don't care. I don't have an issue with what Massimo does. I have an issue with what he does and who he is being inside a mainstream Christian church saying, and then treating us the way that they treat us and not following up when they should be following up on certain things. It's just the hypocrisy of it and the safety of the children that would concern me from my own personal experiences. So we're gonna slide over to our next thing. So our next subject. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, just looking at his books, it's really interesting that in 2018 he wrote the Plymouth Brethren book. I was wondering if he had been going around to schools as a welcoming, they brought him in to have a look at the society so he could write this book based on, what they show him. But it doesn't, because she was saying it's his latest book. His latest book is a sacred eroticism. So it's about tantra and sexuality. So it's not.
Yeah, and that video
But
was from quite a few years back, right? Like it's not
okay,
it's not
it
a
might
most
have been
recent
that's what
video.
he was doing, but yeah, interesting. But it's the point too that it's the hypocrisy.
Yeah, completely. Totally is the hypocrisy that they are not who they say they are, right? Your actions do not align with your words. Your actions do not align with the spokesperson's comments to certain journalists and reporters when you give them to them. They don't align. You're not aligned. The beliefs are not aligning with what you're showing everybody else.
No, there's no separation from evil. You didn't separate from it. You brought it in.
Well, we've seen that purely too with people that are convicted pedophiles or rapists or alleged and are just allowed to live mainstream within the religion still. And people just have to accept that, well, the Lord has forgiven his sins, so you have to as well.
Yeah. And I mean, even just going back to what their actions not lining up, you think of the spokesperson on the one article that was written about you, Ben, the big long rebuttal that they gave back. I don't know if you have that handy.
Yeah, I haven't shared that, but I've got a full copy. The journalist gave me a full copy of their rebuttal. And yeah, it's just the issue that they kept focusing on was that they are not a cult. They didn't even address the fact that they're homophobic because they know they are.
Yeah. So our next thing that we want to talk about today has to do with the car crash that happened in Australia and how the PBCC reported it in their Frank News. So we know that we had news coverage over it, and then Frank News reported it inside there. And we just want to show you the difference so that you're caught up to speed and you get the full story. So I'm going to
And for outsiders listening, Frank News is the Brethren's version of the world's events, filtered basically like communist news to show you what's happening outside, but what they want you to know. And here's an example.
Okay, so first of all, this is actually, Carmen, I'm going to let you take this over because you really know about this.
And well, just the one on the left-hand side is the story that Frank News modeled their story after. Now, one thing that we found out after we pulled this off and we were really alarmed about the editing of the news, Frank News is a subscription news service that is the Plymouth Brethren members can apply for and pay for. It comes with a price. You have to pay for it. And they supply you with your morning news or your noontime news or your evening news. But what they're doing is they're taking the AAP news and then they're editing it to fit their own needs, I would assume. And at first we were a little concerned, like, why would you edit somebody's news? But what we've been told is they must have a subscription to the AAP. So therefore they can take it and change the picture and change the news and change the order of stuff legally without getting into trouble. So we did figure that out. But this particular news story, it came out after that accident in Wangaratta. And the only reason it was brought to our attention was because the real news story was posted on the ex-Brethren Facebook site. And then when the Frank News came out, the kind insider that brought it to our attention printed off the Frank News version and set it beside the one that was posted on Facebook and went, wait, this tells a completely different story. And when you set the two of them side by side, what you'll figure out is there's a number of lines in the news article that have been removed.
Yeah.
And it paints a completely different story when you start removing certain details from a news story.
Okay. So, and to make things, we wanted to say about this, where they got this picture from another article and then just zoomed in. So, I mean, yes, they might have permission to do this, but we just want to show that how they are really not, I mean, they're
Well,
not.
essentially they're controlling the narrative. They're
Yes,
telling
exactly.
you
Right.
if you're
Exactly. Yeah,
inside
exactly.
what they want you to know. And
Right.
have you got the next part? And here's a
Okay,
great
so just hang
example
on a
of
second.
what they're doing.
Okay,
There you
so
go.
here is the real news article, and this is what they presented. So, Carmen, you've got a version that you can read because I can't read that tiny. So I'll let you read
Well,
what the difference was.
If you notice on the one on the left-hand side, there's a number of things that have been highlighted in yellow marker.
Yeah.
The ones in the yellow marker have been completely removed from the Frank News article. And you say, well, they probably did that to keep it shorter or whatever excuse might come out. But what we actually noticed is when you zone in on the things that have been removed, the accident in Wangaratta, as we know, there was alcohol as a factor. And the driver was kept under police guard from the moment that the accident happened until his court case the next day and he was let go. But what's been conveniently left out of the Brethren version is a statement that says a driver under police guard is in the hospital and will face court. Nowhere in the Frank News version is that statement. It has been removed. The second one that has been removed, that's very important to the Wangaratta accident situation, is he has been charged with culpable driving, causing death, dangerous driving causing death, and negligent driving causing serious injury, and also issued a notice of immediate driving ban. Makes you wonder,
Right.
what
But
do you accomplish by taking out the actual reason for the accident?
And then if you look over there, is this talking about the same accident? They've said a 26-year-old woman has been charged. So they've cleverly, creatively edited the article to make it sound like the woman, of course it was a woman, was responsible, when in fact it was the guy that was drinking, the Brethren guy that was drinking and driving recklessly and charged.
Yeah.
So it's
and so what they
So
did,
by taking those two very important statements out, okay, the ones that put the Brethren driver as responsible, by taking those two out, you shoot up that line about a 26-year-old woman who was charged with causing death or dangerous driving after her car collided with a white MG. It makes the story appear as though it was that woman's fault, and it was just by clever editing. Remove those two statements, and it was just cleverly controlled the narrative and changed the whole story.
these are actually all the accidents that happened that weekend. And it was the insiders, when they got this, they were like, well, no, it was a 26-year-old woman's fault. That's literally what they believe. They don't believe that what happened. They believe, by reading this, that it was a 26-year-old woman who was erratically driving and caused it.
And this is something you read about in history books, like about Hitler's time and the mixed medias and the clever, creative newspapers that he controlled, or in Stalin's era, where there was no murder in Russia because Russia is paradise. This is yet another example of people controlling the narrative to create a different picture without saying it, but alluding to it.
Yes, exactly.
And doing it within the confines of the law, because you subscribe to AAP News, you can, you're legally allowed to do it to control the narrative. It's brainwashing. It's just another form of brainwashing.
So for us, we just wanted to point out why going into the OSG, like that OneSchool Global stuff, and the talk about the alcohol and nobody taking accountability and not teaching accountability, right? Here is another example of where they go in and they do their editing, where accountability is not taken, where there is no accountability being shown, right? Like, it's just...
We're seeing the results of no accountability from those school incidences that have led to an adult making a reckless decision and then an alcohol-infused accident. Like, it's we're seeing the results of no accountability. We're
Yes.
seeing the results of
That's why we
hiding.
wanted to bring this up today. Yeah, exactly. Like, this is what happens, right? Like, it's just, and I mean, I feel awful. I feel awful for this situation, because they are, again, it's a product of the environment. It's a product of the teachings. It's the product of the systemic problems that they have in there, where nobody's dealing with what needs to be dealt with. It's just always this constant cover up. How do we cover this up? How do we make it look better? Instead of being like, let's just go in and be like, yes, this person has an alcohol problem. This person's a pedophile. This person's doing this. Just go in and look at everything black and white and just deal with the situation. And then all of a sudden, that gives a chance for this cult to become a mainstream Christian church once again.
Yeah, I think it's really important what we've covered today is really, don't take our word for it. We've shown you examples. Do your own research. Question things. And if you need a scripture for it, there's one about come let us reason together, where Jehovah was like, come let us reason together. Go reason. Ask them. It's the safety of your children that are at risk here, because look what happens when we've seen from the outset of alcohol in schools, teachers complaining, to an adult reckless driving. And this happens out here, but it's a common denominator in there. There always is and has been the butt of most issues, whether it's abuse or violence or driving or accidents. It always seems to tie back to alcohol. Yeah, there is a toxic drinking culture in the Brethren that needs addressing.
Yeah, they have. I mean, it's like you can bring it down to two addictions, right? There's sex addiction and there's alcohol addiction.
Let's make it 3, and power.
And power, 100. Well, power encompasses it all. Yeah, exactly. But you know what I mean? Like, it is. And I mean, when you put that kind of power on people, those kinds of addictions become rampant.
Yeah.
And enabled.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But anyhow, we wanted to give you all a update and really address what kind of safety and what kind of life you want for your children. And my suggestion is go to a library, Google. Obviously, you're not going to be able to do it off your UBT phones, but go Google this stuff.
And if you're not comfortable with that, talk to friends that you trust outside, that you know a good neighbor, another good Christian woman down the road, not us. Like ask other people, is this normal? Is this the way my child is being raised? Is this normal? No, it's not. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Anyhow. All right.
Okay.
All right.
Well, thanks everyone for joining us. And until next time, take care.
Stay
everyone.
tuned.
Much love to you all.
If you are in a high-demand religious group and need help, please go to oliveleaf.network. To share your story or be a guest on the show, email info.getalife@proton.me. Please remember to like this video, subscribe to Get a Life, and comment.